Water is absolutely essential for life. But when it shows up in the wrong place inside your house, well, it becomes this incredibly destructive force. So today we're going to pull back the curtain on the whole anatomy of a water damage crisis. We're breaking down exactly what happens from that first moment disaster strikes all the way to the final steps of making your home whole again. All right, let's get into it. So picture this. You open your basement door and your heart just drops. There's a foot of standing water. Panic starts to set in, right? What do you even do? Who are you supposed to call? Look, this isn't just some made-up scenario. It's a super stressful reality for tons of homeowners. And the crazy part is, the causes can come from pretty much anywhere. For instance, it could be a pipe that just suddenly and violently bursts. This happens a lot in older homes or, during a deep winter freeze. And it can dump hundreds of gallons of water into your house in just a matter of minutes. Or, hey, maybe it's something a little more ordinary, like a failed washing machine hose, or a dishwasher that just decides to give up the ghost right in the middle of a cycle. Honestly, these appliance failures are one of the most common culprits out there. Then you have the really hazardous scenario, a sewer backup. Now, this isn't just water we're talking about. It's a legitimate biohazard, and it needs a completely different level of response. And of course, you can't forget about Mother Nature. We're talking heavy rain, storm surges, and that overland flooding that can just overwhelm even the most well-prepared homes. But here's the thing. No matter what the cause is, the second that water gets in, a clock starts ticking. And that brings us to the first, and honestly the most critical part of any response: speed. I mean it. What happens in that very first hour can literally be the difference between a cleanup you can manage and a truly catastrophic loss. 60 minutes. That's the magic number. Professional restoration companies, the good ones, they aim to be on site within an hour. And why? Well, it's not just some empty service promise. It's a strategic race against time to stop the damage from spiraling out of control. This right here is exactly why every single second counts. See, water doesn't just pool on the floor. It wicks up your drywall, it seeps under flooring, it soaks deep into insulation. That first hour is your absolute best shot to stop it in its tracks. Any delay after that, and you're probably not just talking about drying things out anymore. You're talking about demolition and a major rebuild. Now, you might be thinking, water is just water, right? But in the restoration world, that couldn't be further from the truth. The source of the water actually dictates the entire response plan, all because it determines the health risk involved. The pros use a system with 3 different categories. This whole system was set up by the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. That's a mouthful, so everyone just calls it the IICRC. Basically, these categories classify the water based on how contaminated it is, from perfectly clean to, grossly unsanitary. And the contrast here is pretty stark. On one side, you've got Category 1, which we call clean water. This is from something like a broken water pipe from your faucet. But on the total opposite end of the spectrum, you have Category 3, or black water. This is the nasty stuff, coming from sewage backups or floodwaters that have picked up all sorts of contaminants. It is loaded with bacteria and viruses, and it's a serious health risk. But here's the kicker. Clean water doesn't stay clean for long. In just 24 to 48 hours, as that clean water mixes with your drywall, your carpet, and everything else, bacteria starts to multiply like crazy. This is the critical window before mold starts to take hold, turning a simple water problem into a really serious health hazard. Okay, so you've got this ticking clock, you've got rising contamination risks. So how do professionals actually take a situation from total chaos and bring it back under control? Well, they use a very specific playbook, a structured 3-phase process that works every time. So, phase 1 is the emergency response. This is where crews get in there and extract all the standing water and start tearing out anything that's just too saturated to be saved. Then comes phase 2, structural drying. They use all this specialized equipment to literally pull moisture out of the air and out of the building materials themselves. And trust me, this is a scientific process. It's not just setting up a few fans. Finally, once everything is verified as completely dry, the 3rd phase, restoration, can begin. That's rebuilding your home to get it back to how it was before the loss. In that 2nd phase, the structural drying part, that's where the real science and pretty cool technology comes into play. It's all about tackling the moisture that you can't even see. I mean, think about it. Water gets trapped behind walls, it gets under your floors, it hides inside all these little cavities. A surface might feel totally dry to the touch, but deep inside, moisture could be silently causing rot and becoming a breeding ground for mold. So the big question is, how do you find it and get rid of it? You use a very specialized toolkit. Thermal imaging cameras can actually see temperature differences to reveal where that hidden moisture is. Then you have moisture meters, some that poke into materials and others that don't, to get an exact reading of the water content. And then comes the heavy machinery. Industrial-strength dehumidifiers and high-velocity air movers work together to create this super aggressive drying environment. And sometimes they'll even use air scrubbers to filter nasty stuff like mold spores right out of the air. And the organization that makes sure all this is being done the right way, that's the ICRC. Remember them? They set the global standards for this stuff. So hiring an ICRC-certified technician means you're getting someone who is trained in the official science of drying and restoration. It is absolutely your best guarantee that the job's going to be done right. So, how long does all of this take? Well, for a standard water issue, the structural drying part usually takes about 3 to 5 days. But for more complicated situations, like a major sewage backup or trying to save a really delicate hardwood floor, you could be looking at 1 to 2 weeks before the reconstruction can even start. Okay, so once the property is finally dry and safe, you move into the last phase, navigating the aftermath. And this pretty much boils down to dealing with insurance and understanding what is and what is not covered. This is one of the most important and honestly most misunderstood things about insurance. Your standard homeowner's policy does not cover damage from overland flooding. That means water that comes into your home from the ground up. For that, you need a completely separate policy, usually from the National Flood Insurance Program. So, what does your standard policy actually cover? Generally, it's for sudden and accidental events, like that burst pipe or the failed appliance. What it won't cover is gradual damage, like from a slow leak that you just never got around to fixing. And even something like a sewer backup often requires a special add-on called an endorsement to your policy. So the big takeaway here is you have to know your policy before you actually need to use it. All right, we've walked through the causes, that critical first hour, the science behind the drying process, and the insurance maze. You now have the professional playbook for a water damage crisis. So the only question left is, are you prepared for if or maybe when it happens to you? Because knowing what to expect is really the first and most important step toward turning a disaster back into a home.